Good evening, everybody. My name is Christina, and I am with Atlantic Institute. Tonight, we have a very enlightening conversation, building bridges, fostering unity in today's society, which is a very timely topic. And so with us tonight, we have Dr. Paul Thompson from North Greenville University, and he is going to help us handle this conversation. What we need, just so you guys know, if you have not tuned in with us before, we'd like for you to put your information in the chat of where you're from. And then any questions that you have for any of the participants, you can go ahead and put those in the chat too, and we'll read those as we move along through the evening. I will make sure everybody kind of stays muted, and we have 4 panelists. We have a nice, great conversation tonight. So we have Debbie from Philadelphia and Tom from Central Florida. So we are hitting all the different time zones. Awesome. All right, so go ahead if you'd like to, Paul, take it away.
All right. Well, welcome everyone tonight. We're so glad you have joined us, and I join with Christina in sort of celebrating the national and multi-time zone audience we have tonight. And we're so glad you're joining us, whether you have joined us for multiple Atlantic Institute programs or whether this is your first one. We're glad you're here tonight. So my name is Paul Thompson, and I'm a professor of history and dean of humanities and sciences at North Greenville University. And for those of you who don't know where that is, we are located in the on the northern part of Greenville County in Greenville, South Carolina, not too far from the North Carolina state line in the city of Asheville. So between Greenville and Asheville. And so I am happy tonight to welcome our 4 panelists who will each be discussing the theme of unity. So our conversation tonight is about the concept of unity, I'm going to say, and the practice of unity. And so I think we have at least 2 primary goals tonight. One is to think about unity within the traditions represented, the religious traditions represented here this evening. And I'm going to let each speaker introduce themselves and identify themselves within their own religious tradition. But so the first step is to think about unity within these traditions represented. And the second thing I'm going to want to do somewhere in the middle of this conversation, I'm going to try to steer the conversation towards some conversation about how these faith traditions enrich the American civic goal of unity as a nation, and what they have to offer our American society broadly conceived. We are a nation, we are a republic, we are a democracy, we rule ourselves. And from day one, and actually before day one, I can tell you as a historian that religion has people of committed faiths, a variety of faiths have always been central to the American experience, the American experiment, as historians often call it. And so that it continues to be true today. People of faith are central to the American experience. And so we celebrate people of faith here at the Atlantic Institute. So I am going to, I think I'm going to start with Jason Jones and ask him to introduce himself tonight. And then we'll continue around the screen. So.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here with everybody. I'm excited for tonight's conversation as well. I am representing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm a stake president in that faith, which is a leadership role over 6 to 8 congregations in the upstate of South Carolina. Lived in this area for 17 years in the upstate of South Carolina. And it's a beautiful place. Thanks for having me here.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you. And I'm going to go next to Keith Aden and let him talk about himself.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. It's so nice to see you again. And thank you all my panel friends to be on the same panel. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's very exciting to see people from all over the country. It was awesome. You know, it's making me very exciting. Absolutely. It's wonderful event, and thank you, Christina, for putting this together. So I'm a Keith Aden from upstate South Carolina. I'm located in Greenville, a member of Upstate Islamic Center in Greenville area. So I teach Introduction to Islam at Ali Furman University. I'm a Muslim, and I will represent Islamic tradition here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My friend Frank McKnight.
Hi, again, it's so good to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm Frank McKnight. I am a ordained minister. I have been now for over 30 years. I've been a minister at two different churches, one in the inner city of Chicago and one in the North Indiana area in Gary, Indiana. And I represent the non-denominational Protestant, tradition here. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Chicago State University as well.
Well, thank you very much. And my friend Rabbi George Stern.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm from Philadelphia, originally living in Philadelphia. In between, I was in Nyack, New York, and that's how I knew Paul, from when he taught my kids in social studies in high school, and we became friends. I'm ordained as a Reform rabbi. A lot of my work has been not only in congregational, but actually, until for the last 20 years or so before I retired, I was doing nonprofit executive director work, and some of it involved interfaith work. In fact, while I was a rabbi up in Nyack, New York, I was also an adjunct professor at St. Thomas Aquinas College, Catholic University there. So I got to teach Christians, Jews, and Muslims while I was there. And here in Philadelphia, I ran for 10 years an interfaith organization through which Christian, Jewish, Quaker, and Muslim congregations supported work, a community type work with kids and older adults out in the community.
Well, thank you so much. We are so thankful you all are here, and for our audience, you get a sense of the breadth of this panel. And so, as Christina has already said, as we go through these questions, I have a set of questions, and we're going to just try to make this conversational and light and not super heavy, but just insightful. And I know they're going to have each person will have some thoughtful insights and comments tonight. But as you have questions or thoughts, please feel free to put them in the chat, and Christina will be moderating that, and she may jump in from time to time and make sure we address some of your thoughts and questions as we learn about these four traditions tonight. So the first question I want to start with for everybody is really sort of a 2 or 3 part question, but I think essentially I want each of you to address unity within your faith tradition. Give us just sort of a brief synopsis of how your tradition values unity, what it does to express that value, how your tradition works towards unity, and why you think unity is so important in your particular faith tradition, or at least why is it important to you as you practice your faith. And I'm going to leave this open. I don't know, whoever wants to start first can just jump right in. So who's the bold person to go first? Any takers?
What?
To call on somebody?
Tell you what, since my faith is older than the others, I'll
Ooh,
start.
okay.
How about that?
There you go.
I mean, all right. So,
Sure.
I mean, I guess I would say that, within the group of Jews, speaking generally now, unity is a way of creating community. Community has that unity at the end there, and it does create a sense of purpose. It helps us to express values, show, and also provides safety, frankly, within the community. And that was the case in biblical times and really throughout, that often for Jews, the unity was really important because they lived amongst people that didn't always appreciate that they were there. And so it really played a social role as well as a religious one, I guess you could say. The Romans destroyed the Second Temple in the year 70, and the rabbis the teachers that grew out of the Pharisaic tradition, but who really became the leaders of the Jewish community once there was no more temple. The leaders had been the Sadducees, the priests, and they were kind of out of work. And nobody was retraining them. So the Pharisees took over, and they had for centuries really been being interpreters of the traditions. They asked themselves, how come, I guess the way they might have put it is, how come God allowed this temple to be destroyed? Wasn't really nice, was it? And the answer they uniformly came up with was sinat chinam, baseless hatred. And what they said is the reason the temple was destroyed is that Jewish groups were at one another's throats instead of being unified in perhaps resisting the Romans, but also accepting the fact that the Romans were in charge and their armies were a little bit stronger than what the Jews had. So, but on the other hand, I do want to say, and then I'll be quiet, that unity can be a double-edged sword, and we realize that even within the Jewish community, because if you insist in total unity, which is to say everybody is supposed to do and think in the same way, you really prevent you prevent free expression. You make it impossible actually to innovate. And when we think about some of the things going on today in our world, the Jewish world and the broader world, the call for unity within the Jewish community is a double-edged sword. So
thank you. Yeah.
I'll let it go at that.
All right. Thank you. Who wants to take a stab at this next?
Yeah, I can mention within my religious faith and within the church and the churches that I've been a part of, I think appreciating unity, and I know I may be jumping ahead, but appreciating the diversity within the culture of the church, because many times when we think of unity, that means bringing different people from diverse backgrounds together, not necessarily racial backgrounds, but socioeconomic backgrounds, gender, as well. And then also people from various, educational levels. And then, age, your older, Christians that are part of the church. And so valuing them and bringing them together, and as was mentioned, including them in some of the decisions and some of the activities of the church can really help bring unity within the church. So I think it's recognizing the diversity and including them in the faith, in the process of the function and the role of the church.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank.
I can jump in here. Great thoughts as well. And George, some similar thoughts that might come out a little bit later as well. But just as a Christian organization, we point to the teachings of Jesus Christ about, I'm going to talk about the why first, and I just first go to John chapter 17 in the New Testament of the Bible, where it's the intercessory prayer, and Jesus is praying for his followers, and he says that they may be one as thou, Father, are in me, and I in thee, and they also may be one as us, that the world may believe that thou hast sent me. So we see it as a charge from Jesus Christ to be one, and that has a level of unity to it. Now, of course, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to be one? In a very sort of theological way, we believe that God the Father. He is has a body. He's a flesh and bone, and Jesus Christ was a resurrected Lord. And so when we talk about them being one, it doesn't mean that they came together as one body. And so what do they mean when they mean one? We believe that they mean that they are one in purpose. And that's a great way to kind of think and frame how we think of unity and the importance of being one to follow Jesus Christ's teaching. The purpose of the Godhead is to bring to pass the immortality and eternal life of men, and we're invited to participate in that work and bringing people to Jesus Christ. And I think the gold standard of this, there's a great story in the Book of Mormon, which is a scripture that we adhere, that talks about the people on the American continent and how they interacted with God and Jesus Christ. And there's a story after Jesus Christ has been resurrected and has lived his life in Jerusalem and the roundabout areas. He visits the people in America, and he teaches many of the same things that were taught in the old Jerusalem and in the old land. And it's amazing the change that it has and the effect that it has on the people. And I think our goal would be what happened to that people for about 70 to 100 years after they had received these teachings and had been converted to Jesus Christ. And we can read this, their experience in the Book of Mormon. And it came to pass that there was no contention in the land because of the love of God which did dwell in the hearts of the people. There were no envyings, no strifes, no tumults, no lying or murders, nor any manner of lasciviousness. There could not have been a happier people among all the people who had been created by the hand of God. They did not separate themselves into different groups. There were no separations among them, but they were as one, the children of Christ and the heirs of the kingdom of God. And how blessed were they? So we see one as the goal, that type of unity where we're all united in our efforts to assist one another to grow closer to Jesus Christ and follow his teachings throughout our life. And if we all do that successfully, we obtain that unity and oneness that we know that will bring us happiness, as he said here.
I think it's my turn, right? Being blessed. Okay, great. So if we go with George logic, I think that makes sense because Islam is younger of 3, so that's fine. So unity in Islam is a core principle. When Prophet Muhammad brought the message in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca, Arabs were pagan. They were worshipping idols, but they also believed there was a God above of everything. They associate partners, idols. When Prophet Muhammad came as a messenger, that Muslims believe he was like Jesus, Moses, Abraham, David, one of the messengers. In fact, he came with the very fundamental message was unity. So asking the people to believe in one only, leave everything else. So he asked, who gives all this, rizq in Arabic means all the benefits that you receive, all the food that you receive, where does it come from? And he has questions, and they always point to heaven. The Arabs, they believed, one is in the heaven, it's coming from there. And then he asked, okay, let's kind of believe that one. That was very important. And that's called in Islam, Tawheed. Tawheed is an Arabic word, in fact, can be considered the oneness of God and abandon all other associates to God, to believe God is the only creator. I think when in Islam, there is the first testimonial of faith is called, there is no God but God. That means you kind of abandon all other associates and then believe in one creator, and that's called the testimonial of faith. And according to Islam, if someone really accepts that oneness, that unity of God, then that's kind of the faith. The rest is coming after, like the worship, the religion is coming in play. But the essence of Islam is the unity, the oneness of God. When it comes to the Quran, also in terms of the unity among the Muslims, Quran, there is a chapter 3, verse 103, it says, and hold firmly to the rope of Allah, God. all together and do not become divided. So that's a verse that in Quran God commands to the Muslims to hold firmly to the rope of God, Allah, and do not become divided. Is that possible? I don't think it's possible. So this is a great kind of command from God, as he kind of commands many other things to humanity, but we cannot accomplish. But this is unity, in fact, is a great recommendation, is a great tenet and principle, yet it is very difficult to accomplish. And there is a hadith, Prophet Muhammad, it's not from God, Prophet Muhammad says, for the Muslims, are like one body of a person, he says. If eye is sore, the whole body aches. And if the head aches, the whole body aches. So that's kind of where the Prophet Muhammad give the analogy of one body, how you cannot ignore one component of your body when it acts, that the entire body kind of is in pain. Same thing, Prophet Muhammad calls Muslims ummah. Ummah in Arabic means community, in fact. Therefore, if you ask the Muslims, they say, oh, we are all brothers and sisters. We are all one ummah, one community. That's a very strong message among the Muslims. In fact, to be able to accomplish that one, it was an innovative systems that the Muslim created called Khalifa. If you have heard, there's a Khalifa term. It's just kind of religious leader to unite the Muslims. That's not part of tenet of Islam, but it's a kind of way of governing the Muslims in a unity that the Muslims really kind of invented to unite all of them politically, kind of all the ways that to make sure that they feel there is one community. So I will say unity is kind of very essential, very core in Islam. That's kind of fine, like I was part of the faith and tradition. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your comments. Now, I, as a former high school history teacher, I used to teach a 2-year course in New York called Global History. And so one of the things that I was required to do was to teach about the founding, particularly of the, well, really all world religions. But I taught a unit combined where I did the monotheistic religions, beginning with Judaism and moving to Christianity and then the rise of Islam. And so when I started that unit, because I'm in a public school, right, a public high school, and so when I started talking about that unit, I would sort of sit down and have a little talk with my students, and I'd say, okay, now we're going to talk about religion. This is a public school. I can do this. We can do this. It's okay. And I want you to, you know, embrace the fact that I know each of you have your own religious traditions, but we're going to learn about a variety of them. And then I would say this, I said, you know, I'm teaching you the origins of them. The truth of the matter is they all have changed a lot since they were founded. And I may say, you know, people in this faith generally believe this, and you could raise your hand and say, I'm of that faith, but I haven't been taught that. And that's okay. That doesn't mean I'm wrong or you're wrong. It just means these various religions have developed. And so I would then teach the beginning of Judaism, like I said, the beginning of Christianity, beginning of Islam, and then just begin to trace, shall we say, how the unity collapsed historically in each tradition for various reasons. And it's a very complex and a very long story for each tradition. Even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has, well, it's the newest tradition represented here. It also has struggled with unity. So I know we don't have time. We have a bunch of professors here. We don't have time for a long historical discourse on some of the challenges to unity in your traditions. But I think what we can all agree with is that unity is a very powerful force. And I really like the way George talked about it being a double-edged sword, because a lot of people love to talk about its benefits, and there are a lot of benefits, but there can be challenges to unity. And each tradition has struggled with unity. And so who would like to sort of start us on just I'm gonna say a brief reflection on the struggle for unity in your respective traditions, and sort of just some of the lessons, or just give us a sense maybe of where your tradition is now with some of the differing strands that have evolved over even the centuries, or even in the last couple of maybe decades, or sort of the current sort of lay of the land.
I can jump if you like. Now we can reverse.
Okay, sure.
That's good. Yes, I think, as you said, it is, yes, double-edged sword. Sounds reasonable to me as well. And Islam, when it comes to unity in Islam, unity is not about uniformity. That's important. Because in Islam, it recognizes and celebrates diversity. That's a part of the God's divine will and creation. There is a chapter 49, verse 13. It says, "O mankind, we have created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other." So here the verse is referring to unity of coming from the same source, same parents, namely Adam and Eve. So from male and female, but then also kind of emphasizes diversity, because made you into nations and tribes, different colors, languages, cultures created. So in that regard, there is also diversity over here. While the unity is a goal, Islam acknowledges the natural differences among people and encourage respect to each other. But then it comes into play the challenge, according to Islam. Also, Islam recognizes evil, Satan. One of the way that Islam recognizes and tells Satan is your greatest enemy. And part of the tenet of the faith that Islam believes, Satan is always whispering, has a kind of mechanism, or the way that God created can access the humanity in a different way to whisper, to create the troubles and problems. In fact, one of the things that it tells, there's a story, Satan's in the morning kind of has his lot of helpers, assistants, like those lesser Satans, and they have the meeting about how kind of make the people astray from the path of God, and tells, okay, bring your strategies and go and work and come back in the evening, report on me what you did. And when they come back and report all the things they did, they say, okay, I let this guy to kind of stole, to do burglary. And the other tells, I did this, that the people fight each other. And the other tells, okay, I did this, then this person to kill the others. Satan is not happy. This is something, all the kind of devils, the assistants created, doesn't make the Satan happy. And one of them comes and tell, oh, look, what I did, in fact, I did a great job to start for a couples in the morning. They were very happy, but I turned the conversation, then the couples fought each other. So Satan becomes happy. That's great. You did great job, because now you divided the couples. You kind of created the seed of like the division in the family. Now that's gonna bring more devils, absolutely. So in that example, that kind of analogy in Islam is being kind of mentioned about, the Satan is in fact an active enemy of humanity, how he was active enemy of Adam and Eve. So the same way that one of the area that the Satan, according to Islamic principles, that deals with the humanities about the division. It starts the division between the couples, families, siblings, goes all the way to neighbors, to nation, and to the entire humanity. Is that possible to really kind of eradicate? According to Islamic, that's not. That's called jihad. Therefore, the holy struggle starts from there, being aware, okay, this is where your goal is. There's what you want to accomplish. But in the other hand, there's the challenges. You have an active enemy wants to kind of deviate you from accomplishing that goal. So that's one of the challenges according to Islam. That's really, is that possible in the individual levels? That's always going to be up and down. There will be the moments where you will be able to accomplish, the moments that you will fail. But goal is always struggle in the holy path of accomplishing, that goal. That's where the challenges and the struggles come together. Thank you all.
Well, if we're going in reverse order, I'll jump in there. Thank you, Keith. That was very interesting. I think you kind of bring up a good question here about thinking about what we're meaning by unity in different ways. So if I were to think about unity within doctrine, what is it that God teaches his people? And in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have a living prophet who leads the church, and he is a mouthpiece of the Lord. And so the Lord is the head of this church, is the Church of Jesus Christ, and he will direct doctrine through the prophet, and then and also then a little bit of policies and procedures and the things and way in which we act upon those. And so that creates quite a bit of unity across the globe. It is all coming from source of doctrine and direction on how we practice our faith. So you could go to a meeting in South Carolina, California, Philippines, and Germany, and it will look the same. It'll have the same feel, and the same things will be done all the way across. In terms of, so if we're talking about, well, what would disunity come or splinter on doctrinal manners? There's not really a place in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to split off and form your own congregation, because that would be separating yourself from the prophet of God. Now, early on in our tradition, when there was, after Joseph Smith, who was the founder of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and the first prophet called in these days, there was a little bit of a split there, as there was a question about what would be the continuation of the prophetic role. But since that point, then that doctrinal disunity doesn't occur in terms of a schism within the church. Now, individuals, of course, as I think is common in all our traditions, may themselves decide or not agree that the doctrine or the policy that comes from that prophet is aligned with the way in which they think. And what we tend to see is that they might just separate themselves personally from participating in the unity of the church, but not go off and form some other group. We would love, of course, to maintain and keep them with us and be able to minister, but we have our agency and we can choose. So then that's one side as I think about this unity, and that's in doctrine, and I think it's fairly clear to me, but it might cause a tension if you were one that potentially doesn't feel comfortable in that doctrinal space at that time, and we just have to understand that. But then there's this other side that I love how Keith talked about, and I'm loving seeing some similarities in religious traditions here in your story about the body. In 1 Corinthians, we can certainly read about how there shouldn't be a schism in the body, and the ear and the eye are both important parts of the body. And if you didn't have the ear and the eye, then you wouldn't be functioning as a body as a whole. And so diversity is great. It's exactly what we need. And it would sound just like the story that you were sharing from the Quran. And so we also believe that this tent is large, and it should invite all to come to Jesus Christ and to his restored gospel on the earth. And in fact, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, membership outside of the United States is now higher than membership in the United States. And the place in which we see the greatest growth in the church is in Africa, the continent of Africa now, instead of in other places in the world. So it's a tent that we want to welcome all in that have a desire to improve their lives by following the teachings of Jesus Christ. So there's diversity in that sense by creed, color, or sort of identical things. It's completely in line with the gospel of Jesus Christ to have unity of faith and doctrine across a lot of different people and a lot of different ways in which they approach things, and that enriches our lives.
Yeah.
So that's just my thought on that.
Thank you for mentioning that First Corinthians passage. Written by the Apostle Paul. I was thinking about that too, because part of the thing there, right, he's addressing attitudes, or even James, right? They're addressing attitudes that if you're not like me, you're less than me. And some of those attitudes were beginning to, manifest themselves in early churches. And some of these early writers had to address that wasn't the right attitude within, among followers of Jesus Christ. So, yeah. So
Now,
Frank,
what I wanted to mention, and I'm glad Jason brought this up, with the unity of the faith, I often think about the scripture in Habakkuk where it says, where there's no vision, the people perish. And then it says, write the vision, make it plain. And oftentimes in our religious tradition, it's the pastor or the leader that sets the vision for the church. And then we all come together unified to follow that vision, which comes from, the word of God. And that can be a rally call for the diversity within our church, whether you're young, you're single, you're married, you're men, you're women. All of us can come together and rally around that vision and carry that vision out. And I like the example of the body. We all have a part. But have you noticed when you stub your toe, everybody, your whole body reacts to meet that particular need of that toe because you just stubbed it. And that's really the same way when it comes to unity, is that if there's anything wrong or if there's a part of the body that's hurting, let's give attention to it. And when we do that and restore, I think that kind of perpetuates that unity and that coming together.
yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you.
I guess I'm up. I think historically, we understand that the story of Abraham, well, okay, actually, people will say, Abraham, he knocked down, he destroyed the idols because he realized they weren't anything. There's really only one God. It's a nice story. It's not in the Bible. You don't see it for a couple thousand years. And so what I think Jews see in the Torah, or the full Jewish scripture, is a development that over a couple of thousand years, and there's tension that you'll see between trying to get everybody to follow the same rule, but then you see even within the biblical stories, you see things changing. The community changes. There are, examples even of laws that seem to change. And then once you get into the post-biblical era, or let's say beginning in 2100 years or so ago, what we have in Judaism is the development of extensive texts that are reflections upon the biblical material. And some of this is what we call midrash, which tend to be kind of stories almost, elucidating the biblical texts. We also have the legal aspects, trying to understand it's to understand what did the Bible, what do the texts mean, particularly in the Torah, but as applied to different circumstances and different situations. So we have within the Jewish tradition, traditionally, an understanding that doctrine is fluid. And one of the fascinating things to me, and that I love about the Talmud itself, is that the rabbis will take up an issue. They're essentially saying, hey, what does such and such a law in the Torah mean? In the book of Deuteronomy, what does it mean? And they'll go off on a discussion, and they'll come up and they'll quote other verses, and they'll tell little stories. And then that discussion will end and they'll go on to something else. And you say, well, wait a minute. So what does that, which of those things that you all just said does it mean? And it's really, it becomes up to the next person to comment on it and or the next generation, or, you know, to see. So Judaism tends not to be what I would call doctrinal in that sense. There is an emphasis on action, and then there are two kinds of actions. One is the ritual action, and then the other is the ethical, the moral action. And the thing about the ritual action is, even just going back to the Talmud, there are different opinions. You know, I mean, everything, it may sound silly, but lighting the Hanukkah candles, do you do it right to left or left to right? Do you start with 1 and then go up to 8? Or do you start with 8 and go down? And this is actually discussed. Now, some things ultimately, usually not in the Talmud, but later, rabbis say, oh, this is just too much. Too many people are asking too many questions. Let's set it. So the answer on the Hanukkah menorah is you light them right to left. You're starting with 1 and you end with 8. End the discussion. We do have some of that, but I think as the issue of unity within the Jewish people is complicated because of this centuries, millennia history of not having one answer to everything, not having that one doctrine. One of the, I guess you could say, a famous quotation in Judaism is what we call the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear Israel. Well, this, I don't want to get too complicated. The eternal one is God, and God is one. There's a doctrine. We did finally decide that God is one. There is, well, God is one. Does that mean there is one God? You know, probably so, but God is one. There's this, that creates the unity throughout the world. And it's out of that that we have the conversations around the connection between Jews and non-Jews, and what are our obligations, not just to Jews, but to other people. And maybe we'll get to, I assume we'll get to that. I won't jump ahead, but
well, that's where we're going next.
I can tell you that often rabbis will say, oh, I wish there was an answer to your question. Now, there is an answer, but it's an exposition. It's not a sentence.
Yeah, and most people want sentences.
They want sentences
in our current world,
even before.
Right.
Even before social media, people wanted. People wanted, you know, but Rabbi, what? My mother just died. What are the customs? Well, here are some of them, and some people do this, and some people do that. And some
yeah, never as simple as people want. But yeah, you know, I think another thing I was thinking as everybody was talking, want to mention the Christian concept of the Trinity, because this is one of the doctrines that Christians have used to demonstrate unity in diversity, and there's or community in unity between the three co-equal persons of the Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That we likewise believe there is only one God, but that he manifests himself in three distinct persons, but there is a unity there and a community in the unity in terms of how they interrelate. That is a model in Christian doctrine. So let me switch. As the historian in me, I want to read a little segment. Many of our listeners may know, and maybe some may not know, that when George Washington decided he would not run for a third term, he wrote a speech, a letter. I mean, it was not a speech given, but he wrote a statement that went on for several pages and was published in September of 1796 in a Philadelphia newspaper. And he basically was giving advice about how this young nation of America could continue to successfully exist under the Constitution that had recently been written. And so he has a long list of advice, and among his lists of advice, he has this paragraph. And so I'm going to read this paragraph from George Washington's farewell address in 1796 to the nation, because it's written to everyone on this call. It's written to all Americans. One of the things, just before I read this, I want to say, one of the reasons I am so supportive of the Atlantic Institute in their vision and mission, and have been connected with them in one way or another for at least 10 years now. One of the reasons for my support of them is because they are concerned about developing the same thing that high school social studies and university history professors are interested in, and that is developing the kinds of civic dispositions among citizens of this nation so that different people can learn to live together in community and corporately rule themselves as we do. And that's important. And this is actually the same question that George Washington was trying to address in his farewell address. And he has this paragraph in the middle of his address where he turns to religions. And using the language of the 18th century, he says the following: of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And a lot of times in certain authors, they'll end the sentence that, they'll end the quote there. But let me go a little bit longer so you can hear how he develops that. He says, in vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Happiness, that is, the importance of religion and morality to private and public happiness. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in the exclusion of religious principle. So in 1796, George Washington really could only think of Christianity as he saw the various manifestations, and Judaism. He could only think of those, and all the branches of Judaism had not fully developed at that point as we know them now, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had not, Joseph Smith had not begun his prophecies at that point. And so he had a more narrow conception of religions and religious principles. We certainly, our nation had a very touchy relationship with Islam in the 1790s. There's some scholarship that addresses that. Religion is religion. And today in America, we are more diverse religiously than we've ever been before. And you four gentlemen are just really the tip of the iceberg on that religious diversity today. So I'm just curious, with that quote and with the civic mission of the Atlantic Institute, I'm just curious if anybody wants to address sort of how you feel the teachings of your faith tradition basically on issues of unity, your doctrines, your practices. How do you feel your faith tradition helps, as he says, are indispensable props to political prosperity for our nation, for stability, for harmony? Share with me a little bit what you wish every American knew from your faith tradition that would make us better citizens and work together better.
I can start out with that one, Paul. one of the things, and I'm speaking particularly of the church where I serve now, I think one of the things that I love is the fact that our pastor, our leader, really wants to go out into the community. We have more of a social justice agenda. When we look at the teachings of Christ, he says, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? And so I think the role of the church, as I know it, must address those issues, not only for the common good of man, but for evangelism purposes, and then to meet that basic need. Because once that basic need is met, the ears become open. They want to know who you are, what are you about. Several things just to mention it and not to take up any time. But one of the things that we do is we have a food for you, where we invite the Gary community, which is a highly poverty-stricken area, with meals, with food, baskets and everything. And one of the unique things we do is we feed them every third Sunday. Then they come to our service, they get a ticket, and when they leave, they get a food basket, to take with them. What it is it's evangelism, and it's also helping the community. That's just one, thing. Giving support to drug ministries, giving support to back to school programs, having certain things like that. I think that lets the church know, and the body of believers that I'm surrounded with, is that not only are we confined to these four walls, but we have to do something for society at large. And I think that's so key and so important, which I love regarding some of the things that we do.
Yeah.
I can jump if you like, Paul. So you mentioned about George Washington being a political leader. Islam somehow differentiates Prophet Muhammad from the other prophets in different ways. He says Muslims believe that he was also a political leader, because Prophet Muhammad, different from Jesus and Moses, in fact, he served as the head of state. He established a state,
right,
and then he served that as the political leader of the Muslims. It was interesting when you look at the history of Islam, when he was forced out of Mecca to Medina because of the pagans. They tortured the Muslims, and they had to find a solution to save their lives. And when he arrived to Medina, a new city, Prophet Muhammad, he established an interesting concept called Charter of Medina. In Medina, it was a city of about 10,000 people. It's a big town. Back then, like if you think about 622, and there were about 4,500 Jews, there were about 4,500 Muslims, about 1,500 people from different, roughly, faith groups. What Prophet Muhammad did, in fact, in the first 6 months of his arrival to Medina, and he invited all the different tribe leaders. It was tribalist society. There was no central government. And now he invited them and had a pact called Medina Charter that create the unity, like a very similar to United States. Okay, we are one nation to defend ourselves from the external threats, enemies, and we are all independent internally to govern our own affairs based on our own faith tradition. In fact, that's interesting. That concept worked very well. When the Meccans, the pagans from the other, Mecca came and attacked Muslims, part of this pact, Jews, other faith traditions, they became part of the military and army, defended the city together. They fought together against the enemy. So when it comes to the Islamic tradition, it seems that he, as a political leader or the state leader, kind of showed an example of transcendent your own faith tradition to create a unity in the society for the best interest of everyone, not only for your own faith group. And the happiness of the society and community is important in that concept to transcend from your values, create a universal set of the values that you will all agree and unite around it rather than divide it. How many times this was accomplished in the history of Islam? Maybe, after that, there were a couple times in Jerusalem. Now, one of the tensions we know with our Jewish brothers, what goes in Jerusalem, like in today. In fact, it happened during the Salah ad-Din. There's kind of great leader, that unity was accomplished. There is another leader called Omar bin Abdulaziz, that was accomplished. There were several other leaders throughout the history were able to unite different faith group peoples to kind of live in a very peaceful way. In fact, I was born in Turkey. I kind of raised in Turkey, and Ottoman Empire at some degree was very successful to create such a kind of unity, not assimilating the cultures or religions. Whenever the Ottoman was a big empire, they conquered a huge vast of land, but they have not forced anyone to convert, to change their languages, all their cultures. It was pretty, I would say, in harmony in that footstep. So there were kind of successful times in the history, follow the footstep of Prophet Muhammad, and there were also failures as well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always been a
Well-
challenge to create unity.
When I grew up here in Philadelphia in a very large old Reform synagogue, and the emphasis there was on what we now in the Jewish community call tikkun olam, fixing the world, or so it was in social justice. I remember in 8th grade we had a course on the prophets, and the prophets were, that was really a great deal of emphasis, because looking especially at when they screamed and yelled at people for not doing the right thing, and right didn't mean ritual, it meant how they treat one another.
Yeah.
I mean, the story of Jonah is amazing, because he goes through all these trials and tribulations. Why? Because God said, go to Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian nation that was threatening really the Jewish or the whatever you want to call it nation, and tell them that they can repent. And no, Jonah said, I don't want any parts of that. And we know how that all ended up. So there, the prophet Amos, I jotted a couple of these things down. To me, O Israelites, you're just like the Ethiopians. True, I brought Israel up from the land of Egypt, but also the Philistines from Kaftor and the Arameans from Kir. And then Micah says, have we not all one Father? Did not one God create us? Why do we break faith with one another, profaning the covenant of our ancestors? So there's a definite strand in terms of Jewish tradition about caring not only for Jews, but for others. And certainly in the United States, I think that has really become a major part of the work within the Jewish community. There's one of the nation's major refugee resettlement groups is HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Well, from the name, it gives you an idea that it was started by Jews. And what they were really doing was they were resettling Jews in the very end of the 19th century and into the first quarter of the 20th century, after which the US changed its immigration rules in such a way that they kind of made sure that Italians and Jews and Poles and Russians couldn't get into the United States, not to mention Asians and Africans. So, but today, that organization, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, goes by its acronym HIAS. They never indicate Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. They have, it is still largely, the board is largely Jewish, but the people that they deal with are very rarely Jews.
Mm.
When the Russian Jewish immigration happened in the 1970s, when finally Jews were able to get out of Soviet Union, that was really the last time that HIAS dealt mostly with Jews. So with the help of HIAS, my one of the congregations we attend has sort of adopted or assisted a family from Syria, a Muslim family, a Muslim family from Afghanistan, and now a Christian family from Bolivia. All through HIAS, because they're connecting us in the synagogues with folks. So, you know, I do think that comes out of Jewish tradition, and I think that many Jews, of course, are part of what we might call secular or even interfaith do-good groups, to because that we recognize is a major part of the tradition. Just one other biblical thought, you know, Isaiah, we read this on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Isaiah says, "Is this the fast I ask you to keep?" And then he goes through the kind of rituals, and the answer is no, that's not the fast I ask you to keep. The fast I ask you to keep is what gets you to help the poor, help the hungry. That's the fast that God wants of you. And you know, so I think that that's sort of embedded through Christianity and even Islam, for that matter, into the American zeitgeist.
If you guys don't mind, I'm going to ask a question that was asked in the chat. And this would be for all of you as well. And I know I've personally seen this when I've gone to some different programs of different faith organizations, but Tim Brown was asking, currently we're seeing young people less interested in religion. What are your thoughts on how to keep the younger generation active in church? And I know there's some, I've been to tour of faiths that we used to do in person, and we'd go and we'd sit with the tour group, and there'd be like, I look around and I'm like, where's the families and where's the young people and where's the youth and where's the, you know, and it's like, oh, you don't see that a lot anymore.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very valid question.
It is. There's a lot of research and statistics coming out all the time on this challenge. Any insight?
I think so. I think it's a
I can just mention some of the things. Okay. No, go ahead.
Jason started first, and Frank.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, Frank was gonna. Before I answer that, I just want to appreciate what I heard is these common themes that were coming through all of our religious traditions about what might be needed for democracy in the United States, and they all focused on what I think our basic teachings are about our responsibility for others and seeing each other as our brothers and sisters. And divisiveness is something that I'm quite concerned about and related to the foundations of democracy in the United States. And so things like this and focusing on the teachings of our religious faith that focus on the need and value of each individual person as one of our brothers and sisters. Just really need to see that come through all of our different traditions. There's a lot of ways I think to address, and I think we'll come across. I do think with some of the studies that I have seen and such is that this generation, if I'm kind of focusing on the youth just as a whole, even in studies like from the Pew Research Center, indicate that this generation is not satisfied with being told what to do and then be happy to follow it. Just because it was told. And I think my generation growing up, it was a little bit more, not universally. This is, of course, not universal, but that. And so when I think about this question, it has to be relevant to the youth, and they have to understand the why and how that's relevant to their life and the people they're around. And that's what I think are striving to do in our faith tradition, is to refocus on the central doctrines. Yes, we have lots of principles that we follow that will bring you joy and happiness in life. But if you don't know why and understand why they're important, then this generation might step away from that. And I think one of the main things that I think is important to focus on is maybe a little bit of a tension that I don't think is a tension, but is perceived as a tension. When you look at the two great commandments, when the lawyer asks Jesus Christ about what are the two great commandments, and he says, first is to love the Lord thy God. And then second is to love thyself. In John chapter 14, we can see what it means to love the Lord thy God is to keep his commandments. And so there's some that may perceive that there's a tension between keeping God's commandments, following the things that he's taught, and then just loving everybody. And I see that in a younger generation, that feeling incompatible. And I think that if we truly understand that God loves us and that's why he's given us commandments, because they're the pathway to happiness in this life. And one of those commandments is to love one another, that we judge less, and that we see people where they are and take them to bring them to a place that could bring them greater happiness with love, not with a desire to force upon them any outcome that we desire, but to show them a way that we know will bring them happiness, we know will bring them satisfaction in life, but to do it in a way that helps them understand the why, and out of love and not out of any other motivation.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention in regards to the youth, I think one thing definitely is the church has to be intentional in bringing youth in, capitalizing on the youth that's already there, but then have them to be a part of what the church is. Our church has a media ministry. The majority of the participants of that are young people because they like working with cameras. They enjoy photographing and things like that. So I think you want to kind of create their involvement, number one. And then I think that the other thing is to create a space for them to be young people, whether it's Wednesday night basketball game, or you invite a youth singer or something like that can at least attract them, and then the current youth can invite friends and to come to their church. So I think being intentional, and what is it that draws the young people in a good Christian clean environment is a start, and then you can kind of see how that can work from there.
Tim, you asked how to keep them active in church. I assume the church includes mosque as well in your question. So that's a problem of not Christians. I think also Muslims as well. I want to acknowledge, especially in the United States, this is a modern, I'll say, it's a problem of mostly almost all faith traditions. My observation is the foundational problem is the individualism that being I think the sense of too much independency in terms of financially and everything else, to kind of being away from, first of all, family, community, everyone else. In, I will say, Islamic faith tradition, it will make an easy trap for a youth trap to the Satan, because I'm just kind of thinking from the faith perspective. Okay, so because again in Islam there is always active enemy, the as called Satan. So for an individual to be trapped to that enemy is going to be easier when you kind of promote that kind of sense of individualism too much and separate from the community. So therefore, to get them into a community is going to be more difficult for Satan to deal with them. That's a kind of intentional design in that context. When you look at from that doctrine, okay, they have to be away from the community, from the mosque, from the church. So it will be easy to be kind of separated, disconnected from God. For Muslims, I think I will say in the United States, there are so much I will say, attention to this problem and try to find different solution. I want to give an example to kind of end with it. So I myself kind of see this. I have been in the United States over 20 years and I have 4 children. So like my oldest just kind of graduated from high school, and I see this challenge as well for myself. And to be part of the solution, then I kind of decided to be part of solution. What I did, in fact, I recently bought a university campus in Iowa with the plan to turn into an Islamic boarding school for middle and high school. So that's going to be, to me, the objective of that boarding school is going to be very academically rigorous, to target the top colleges in the United States, to establish businesses in the high school, to make sure that the kids know that they will be rich. Okay, that's a very important thing. So if you kind of have the carrot, right? Okay, you come to school, then I will teach you how to be entrepreneur, and then to be also a good Muslim. And the good in the sense that you will kind of turn all of your resources to serve humanity, to serve your human fellow, to kind of serve God, to seek the pleasure of God. So it's kind of the way that to make sure that the satisfy their worldly needs is important. They want to be successful. They want to have a good financial life. To make sure that you give this ability to them in the same time, as Jason said, to teach them why. What's the purpose of the creation? Why do you kind of live on this life? What's going to happen after you die? To make sure that they will kind of understand the life holistically. And that way they will get, I think, not only materialistic pleasure, they will have the spiritual pleasure, they will have the sense of responsibility, accountability all together to be a good, responsible human fellow and a servant to God. So this is kind of an individual, humble, I will say, project that I want to contribute to my own community. Thank you.
George, you Jewish, the next
well,
generation?
Sure. Well, so we just as in the church and in the mosque, the synagogue has we face the same issue. I think that some successful congregations have realized that there are different entry points for different people. Some of that has to do with youth, but some of it is even adults. And certainly in one of the synagogue, well, in the synagogue that Debbie and I mostly go to, they make it really, it's interesting, on a Saturday morning, the Sabbath morning, there are generally, summer is a little looser, but generally 3 worship opportunities for adults and families, each of them a little bit different, which meets some different spiritual needs. But there also, during the school year, there are children's, I forget, they have a word for it, but children's services at 2 different levels, so that that's the service part. But they're also, because there's a pretty extensive childcare program at the synagogue, there's a really nice playground. And many of us joke that frequently the biggest minyan, the prayer group, is the playground minyan, because that's where the parents go with the little kids. But one of the things it does, and then they come in, they know when services are going to end and there's some food. So they come in with their kids. But those are different entry points. And it's not just services. There's a weekly meditation program, and there's a lot of other, educational choices. So, and for the youth, there also are, we figure out ways to include them in our social justice work, but in ways that have special, meaning for them. So I think that in the US, it's hard because of this cult of individualism. I mean, it's a cult of a certain kind of independence that goes back 250 years. But the last 50, 60 years has been so much emphasis on individual, not on community. And and I don't think it's not really easy for any religious organization to sort of take on the country. But although, hopefully, maybe working together, we can figure out unity, we can figure out ways to try to shift things back. And maybe it'll begin to happen as more and more people are seeing the problem of disunity in our country. Maybe more people will think about ways for unity, and then that will enable the religious groups to sort of jump on that bandwagon to some extent, because it's just not something we can do. I mean, this great idea that Keith had, but I don't know how big that organization is going to be, but may not at first be able to help all that many people at once. It'll grow, but it could become a model for something else, for other places, for other societies, for other religious groups, or even unified interfaith religious groups.
Thank you. So I'm just curious if anybody else that's watching has any other questions, because we just want probably to take one more question, then we'd like to wrap it up. We're about 20 minutes. Usually we keep everything to an hour. This, I know, as a panel is going to go a little bit further than that, but I just want to check because we want to make sure that we're mindful of everybody's time. And just make sure, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Any one last minute question? I appreciate the insight on that. My takeaway actually is going to end up probably being in the beginning when Frank said, you have to have diversity first to have unity, to have a place, kind of that scenario. And it was like, oh, that's, you have to have diversity. In order to have unity, there's got to be diversity to create unity. And I thought that's kind of a neat thought. Like, I hadn't thought of it like that. Like, there's like, that makes sense.
You have to have somebody to unify.
Yeah.
I like the comment that unity doesn't mean uniformity.
Yes.
Right.
That's really important.
Yeah.
Yes. And I enjoy that too.
Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts from our panelists, since I have nobody that's put a question in the chat, which usually means you've all done a really great job speaking.
I want to just add to something Jason had said before, when the lawyer asked Jesus about the greatest commandments, I often think of, his answer, love God and then love your neighbor as yourself. To me, the love God is a focus on the individual act, and the love your neighbor as yourself is a focus on a communal aspect of living. And I think that answer is trying to create, in that answer, I believe Jesus was trying to create a balance. And what George and Keith were lamenting about the extreme individualism of America, and maybe, as George says, particularly in the last half century, as being problematic, I would say our society is out of balance in trying to, we're not holding the individualism and the community in tension the way we should ideally. And hopefully that will change for the health of our society.
Yeah, very good thought too. Anybody have a last thought? I do really thoroughly appreciate how Jason was able to pick up on how there was the woven message between all the faiths. That there was some commonality, because it always works out towards the, somewhere in here that we find that there's a commonality. There's not so much a division as there is more in common.
I just want to mention that, and one of the major holidays for Jews is Passover, Pesach, and it's the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And we talk about that as the holiday of freedom. But in the Jewish liturgical calendar, what happens is, beginning on the second day of that holiday of freedom, you count 49 days and you get to another holiday, which is associated with the giving of the law at Sinai. And when you think about that, it's kind of saying, okay, you got freedom from Pharaoh, but real freedom has to include following, creating community, creating, and some not uniformity, but agreement, unity agreement. And so freedom isn't just freedom to do whatever you want. It's freedom to make it possible for everybody to flourish. And that means you can't just run roughshod.
I would like to add maybe my final comments before we end. So I think tonight gave me a huge, positivity, and I will say positive vibe and hope as we are kind of approaching to our, election date, and so much tension and division, so much propaganda going on to solidify their base. Understandable, those are politicians. This is what it happens in everywhere. But we are responsible citizens, right? And we are in our own local community. I think our main responsibility to not fall in that trap. Everyone in that level, maybe they kind of serve to their self-interest, but our interests are our community, right? Our unity over here. I think at the foundation, that's the beauty of America. Decentralization of the government is a great thing in one way, because that's gonna kind of really prevent dictatorship in one way. It's kind of check and balance. So where I came from, in many other countries, this is not such a possibility. So if you have a strong leader in other country, it might fall into the grab of that, leader. But here in America, I think the beauty is that, the people are really holding the power in one way. Okay, I cannot say 100%. So, but this is the way that we can balance, and there's a great hope. Then I see it tonight that we all emphasize, almost like from the different faith traditions, cultures, right? And now we emphasize the same message. That's a great thing. Give me hope. And given not only the United States, I mean, you see the war between Ukraine and Russia, like the Israel and Palestine, and look at the different, Iran. There, globally, we have a lot of issues and troubles. I think we have to kind of bring so much emphasis to unity in a way to make sure that, okay, look, we have a lot of commonalities. And when we talk about our faith traditions, we are very similar. Why do you kind of think that, we have so much differences? We might hate from each other. We might really fight from each other. So tonight, I kind of feel, I hope that we had expand this message globally, nationwide, to everywhere. So we have different leaders of different faith groups coming with the same message, and the hope is so important. I want to thank you each for bringing this message from your community, and thank you everyone participating in this. And I hope when you leave tonight with a big positivity and become ambassador of the positive message and unity to your own community. Thank you.
Thank you, Akif.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Jason, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for
Great evening. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great ideas. Great conversation.
Thank you very much. And then that will
Thank you.
conclude our conversation. Or did you have a final thought, Rabbi Stern? Nope. Okay. Then that will conclude our conversation. Thank you very much, all of you, for being on here. Thank you all that were here with us tonight. And let me just remove spotlights so everybody can feel like they're not sitting in a goldfish bowl. So I'd like to thank you guys. If you are still on here and you would like to unmute yourself and say thank you to the speakers, you feel free to. Otherwise, you are free to go for the evening. Go get your dinner, do whatever else you need. Go drive home if you need to get home. But we thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Christina.
you.